Basically, I love creating things with my hands. I've always been a very hands-on person. Basically, making people happy with food is like something that I really, really enjoy, and that's sort of like the big thing for chefing, in my opinion.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Often taking on the role of head chef means you're not only having to manage people for the first time, but manage and balance your own creativity with the desires of the restaurateur too. Sometimes, though, a role comes along where head chefs are given complete autonomy on a menu, a chance to truly share their ethos on a plate. Toby Stansfield is the new head chef of BIstro Fitz at the old Fitzroy Hotel. Toby, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you going?
Good. You've had a few head chef gigs, but this one is a little different. I spoke to James Thorpe recently, and he said that he likes to give chefs complete autonomy. Is that the position you find yourself in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I actually think it's a pretty rare thing. Usually these days, I guess, restaurateurs are generally operators, like the sort of people that have worked in the industry for a long time and they've done, this and that, or they've been a chef or, been on the front of house, and they always like to have their input and have the final say. But yeah, this is very, very different.
What's it feel like for you? I know you've been in the role of head chef before, but does it feel different? Are you nervous about this opportunity, or how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different sort of vibe, because obviously most head chef roles, you sort of have a brief where someone's sort of giving you some guidance on where they want you to go with it or something like that. But I also am pretty excited because it just means I can really just put what I want up and sort of, play with the things that I really want to play with and that kind of thing. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, tell us about your approach. The old Fitzroy Hotel is a very popular venue in Sydney, and there's been a string of pretty amazing chefs just previous to you getting the role.
Yeah.
How have you approached the menu, and what should we expect?
I'm looking for, like, the sort of thing that I want to do is kind of having a really solid, classic kind of pub menu going on downstairs, which anyone can sort of come in and they more or less know what to expect with, like, a pub vibe. And I don't want to make it too challenging for anyone or anything like that. I just want everyone to have a nice relaxing time, feel welcomed, and basically just be able to sit down and just be like, oh yes, I want a steak, or I want seafood salad, for instance, or something like that. If you feel snacky, then that's totally fine. I want to accommodate all that sort of thing. And upstairs, I just want to make it like a bit more of a refined sort of bistro menu. Just like, I don't want to lean too heavily on any particular kind of cuisine, which I've never really done. I like to sort of jump around with flavors and combinations, and maybe not keep it all just one sort of maybe Euro cuisine or say Asian fusion or something like that. I like to play with it a bit.
Well, I want to explore the menu and what you are creating there in more detail shortly, but take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
So had a pretty classic upbringing of, my mum was always looking after kids, for over 30 years. She always had kids in the house and cooking, always cooking and that sort of thing for everyone. And my parents also brought in a lot of sort of people traveling around they met who'd like to come and stay. So I think these people had like a huge influence on, she always cooked a lot of worldly things. Like she sort of stopped from cuisine to cuisine. Like she really touched on like Indian for a very long time, like some years, and then went to Thai food for like some years again. And then there was just, bangers and mash sometimes, but yeah, she always had something really, really nice to put on the plate, and I guess that made me appreciate food quite a lot. from a young age. She had a few friends that were chefs when I was in my, before I was 10, I reckon. It was probably the first time I sort of helped one cook, and we, made dinner together, and it was pretty fun. I didn't really realize at the time that it would be such a big part of my life. But it was, I guess that was like the earliest moment that I really had was, maybe I was like 8 or something. I don't know. Yeah.
When did you first start thinking about a career as a chef?
I was probably in my senior years of high school. It's just having odd jobs, really, like, just making a bit of cash, like pocket money sort of thing. And I started working in kitchens as a kitchen hand, just, because I sort of like the environment. I like the people that I was working with. You always sort of mix with a fun group of people, and it's always, it's always quite fun. So that just like drew me in. And then after doing that for like a year or two, I just got really sort of interested in the cooking side of things, and I just decided to take the leap and just go for it, do an apprenticeship.
Do you have any stories from those early years when you were doing your apprenticeship and what sort of impact that had on you?
I started an apprenticeship around about when I was 19 or 20. I started in the Sunshine Coast. I had just moved back from Sydney. I just moved down there just to sort of, more down here to see, what was around and sort of change it up a bit. And then I realized it was just like incredibly expensive, because I guess 10 or so years ago when in kitchens as an apprentice, you wouldn't be earning very much money at all. Like I think I was getting like $11 or $12 an hour in my first year, which was, obviously not really enough to live on. So I moved back there so I could live with my parents and they could help me out for a little bit just for my first year. What a crazy ride that was. I really did not have much experience at all. And at the time, I probably bit off a bit more than I could chew, to be honest, in terms of like workload, because I'd never really witnessed how hard chefs really worked. Back then at that point in my life, it was something pretty strange to me. And then that was quite a culture shock, I guess, but it, obviously got used to it pretty quickly. And I just loved it, I guess. I loved the pressure.
What were the really important venues or people that you worked with in the early years as you were building your career?
Definitely Paul Lee and Dan Baum from sales in Noosa, where I had that was where I started my apprenticeship. Those guys, really fun, cool people, really, really nice people to work with, and they were very seasoned chefs. And Paul, the head chef there, I think he's still the head chef, actually. He's been there for years and years. He just had so much knowledge about food and just different cuisines and things like that. And that's sort of where I got, a hunger for doing a bit more, not really sticking to one particular cuisine type thing. He really influenced that. And he really taught me how to work fast and hard, which I think carried into my later years. He gave me a really good sort of basic knowledge, grounding sort of skill set to continue on. I was there for about maybe a year and a half, and then I came down to Sydney and I applied to all of the best restaurants at the time, and then Phil Wood got back to me from Rockpool 89 when it moved to Bridge Street. I think it had just been there like maybe it opened that year, actually. I think it was open for about 4 or 5 months before I got there. I learned so much from that guy and the whole team there, and really got my ass kicked. multiple times over and over again.
How different was it compared to the kitchens that you were used to?
Oh, it was completely different. Just a completely different thing. The competitive element of the kitchen was just like alien to me. I think it was something that you'd probably expect in, like high-end restaurants, in sort of the bigger culinary spots in the world. But, that really, really molded me into sort of what I am today. And I'll never really forget that time and a few of the hard and good times,
Phil Wood is an incredible chef, but incredibly shy as well. What's he actually like to work with?
Yeah, he is a pretty strange guy, but also very, very lovely guy at the same time. He had such a different sort of outlook on flavor pairings. I thought there was always a few things that you would just think that would never work when you just see it on a plate or hear the recipe and when you're first hearing about it, sort of thing. And for some reason, he just had this knack for making things that shouldn't really work very well, which I think was a really good superpower of his.
You made the move back to Sydney and worked with Phil Wood. You've worked as a head chef in quite a few positions, but before those opportunities came about, what were the real sort of important places for you in Sydney?
Well, to be honest, I actually went straight from sales to Rockville, and I was at Rockville for about 3 years, maybe a little bit longer. So I went there as an apprentice, and I sort of built my way up to CDP on the doing the meat section mostly. Through there, I just met a lot of people around through the sort of staff there and people working at other places, and I guess they just had a pretty big influence on my time as a chef in my earlier years. But after that, I went straight to Yellow after that, actually, when it became after it became 11 Bridge and went to Jade Temple is when I left and went straight to Yellow, because I had a very good friendship, I guess, with the head chef at the time, Chris Benedict.
Tell us about that change. Yellow was one of the best, and still is one of the best vegetarian restaurants in Sydney. What was it like changing that focus to just vegetables?
It was really exciting, actually. I had really bright bush. I had a really bright bushy tail about it. I was really, really excited to start working with vegetables and see what I could do, or what people would do and could do with, playing with them in different textures and different sort of pairings that weren't your norm, and just making vegetables exciting, which, to be honest, I found pretty hard most of my time up until then. Even when I was working there, still, it was sometimes pretty difficult to come up with something new and, unique, I think, with a focus around just purely one vegetable or a few vegetables on a plate, to make it really pop.
Are there any discoveries or vegetables or dishes that you can tell us about that sort of changed that in you and your perception of what you can do with vegetables?
I learned a bit about fermenting there. I didn't go incredibly deep, but I did touch base with a bit of fermenting. And I mean, there was one dish I made that was cucumbers, young almonds, and a kelp and what's the other thing that was on there? I just like this. Can't remember the name of it now. But agretti, sorry, something that's commonly used in sort of a quiche type thing in Europe. Those sorts of things to me initially didn't really stand out as veg that would, or products that, or produce that would really go that well together. but for some reason it just worked very well. Or there was another dish with roasted beetroots, a camel curd, and kimchi, like an aged kimchi that I made that aged for probably 3 weeks. So it was like super dank. It worked really well with camel curd, and also roasted beets had that earthy note. So that was like another winner for me.
Tell us about your first head chef role. How different was it compared to what you'd been used to in your career?
Well, I think the management side of things was like the biggest sort of hurdle to come across, I think, initially. And then like I get pretty fixated on particular tasks, which I think is probably one of my downfalls, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist with some things, and I get really, caught up. Maybe I got a bit too caught up in the management side of things, where I sort of lost a bit of my creativity, and just trying to balance those things really came like quite hard to me. Like it was that was probably the trickiest thing to really grasp and wrap my head around when I took my first sort of head chef role.
You're in the Bentley Group for quite a while, and also moved over to Monopole. Tell us about your time there. Quite a different offering to Yellow.
Yeah, it was. So the wine bar setting, people like to, come there for like a special occasion sort of dinner or something like that, or maybe just a boozy lunch. The offering I like to I was trying to make it a pretty elevated and, snack sized for the first menu I did. Had a nice little it's kind of like a pita pocket type thing, made from spelt sourdough, which I learned a lot about bread working at Yellow. So I really wanted to put a little sourdough number on there with beef tartare inside and a kombu egg butter. But yeah, I was just thinking like quite snacky stuff when I first went there, and I had a bit more of a Euro approach to it, I guess. It was pretty fun working there, to be honest. Had a good time. It was a nice crew.
The last couple of years have been challenging, but there's also been lots of opportunities, and Fabrica emerged in a young, dynamic hospitality group. Tell us about Fabrica. Yeah,
so it basically all spawned out of the lockdown and COVID happening. So I left Monopole basically around the first lockdown, sort of in the middle of the first lockdown. It just sort of wasn't working for me, and sort of wanted to part ways, and then had a bit of a break. Obviously, there wasn't really any work going around. Everyone was just trying to make ends meet with their businesses, and so it was a pretty tough time. But I'm good friends with one of the owners of Ragazzi. And he sort of just hit me up saying that this was something that they wanted to do. So, because they were making pasta packs and things like that at Ragazzi during the lockdown, sort of selling that, through the shop. And then Scott Williams hit me up and asked if I wanted to head up Fabrica, and I was stoked. I was pretty interested. Pasta wasn't something I never really touched on before, and I was really keen to learn about it. So that was a really good move, I think.
Tell us about that business, because it's a little bit different to a restaurant. But what did you take from your time at Fabrica?
Well, it's very much a retail store, where sandwiches and sort of lunchtime pasta was on top, and also learning a lot about pasta and different doughs and how different shapes and things like this was a huge part of that. We sort of did a wholesale things were creeping up in that business. So there was a lot of supplying internally to the restaurants inside the group, like Dear St. Eloise and Love Tilly, Divine, and also Rigati as well. Just sort of like lightening the load from those restaurants, so we could sort of do most of their pasta production, which was a pretty unique experience, I guess, sort of leaning more on the production side of things rather than a restaurant offering service, but obviously balancing both to some degree, which was something that, you know, I got a bit of insight into, which was also, it was good fun, and I had a really great team there, which the guys are still there now. Annie and Tom. Annie's the baker, and Tom was doing more butchery and things like that, which both went to all the restaurants as well. And then other restaurants sort of started getting in on it and buying products from us. So, you know, it was really cool to just have our products at Fabrica sort of going out to, you know, some of the better restaurants in Sydney, which was pretty exciting.
Previous to you scoring the role at the old Fitz, Nick Hill was there for a period of time, and Anna Ugard. How did the job come about for you?
So I was in the production side of things for the Fabrica group. So, for the Love Tilly group, for doing fully wholesale stuff to, you know, for retail and things like that, and larger sort of pasta orders for restaurants. So I was just getting a bit stale for me. I didn't have anything against it or anything. It wasn't a bad gig. It was, you know, it was a good, different challenge. And then one of my very good friends, who's also a good friend of Anna's, just like she had the idea that she was leaving and sort of had to ask around to see, you know, try and fill the role basically. She asked him, and I think he wasn't in the right place to do so. He sort of had other priorities, which, you know, is what it is. And he sort of asked me, he just said, why don't I put your name up for it? And then, you know, the rest is, I guess, history. It sort of just went from there quite quickly and just evolved into me taking over.
Tell us a bit about what you're cooking there. They've obviously got the bistro upstairs, but the pub downstairs with very different menus. Can you give us a dish or two from the various areas to sort of exemplify your approach?
Yeah. So I want to touch throughout like each menu I'm going to do here. I think I'm going to touch a bit on, you know, Australian nostalgic sort of things. Like on the first menu I'll be putting up, there's going to be an ode to the rooster roll, you know, like the classic red rooster roll, which is something that personally I surfed a lot in my younger years and still do. And there was something that I'd always have with my mates after we went surfing was we'd go stop by Red Rooster because it was right by my friend's house that we all hung out at, and you know, we'd all just get like a rooster roll or something like this, and it was just one of those things to me that's just it's a bit gimmicky but also so solid. And I just want to make my own sort of one of those down at the pub, which I think is just like a great little pub feed type thing. That some chips and a beer, just how could you go wrong, really? And upstairs I want it to be a bit more, I guess, like flirty and fun. Obviously, like with having my newfound pasta love and experience, I learnt some really cool shapes from Scott, like Truffier, a really cool hand shaped one, sort of rolled into like a little lightning bolt shape. So I'm gonna put one of those on this little semolina Truffier dish with a pesto and pangrattato, pine nuts. Really excited about that one. Also, a crepe cake, I think, is something else that I'm doing, which is a bit of a luxurious item to me, which I'm really excited about, with dulce de leche and rosellas. Tastes really yummy, to be honest, but it's already probably my favorite. So I just want to keep it a bit more fun upstairs kind of thing. Yeah.
You've worked in all sizes of kitchens, and the old Fitz has quite a small sort of space. What's it been like managing that and sort of executing what you want to do?
Executing it, I don't think there will be much of an issue. It's a pretty well-equipped kitchen, to be honest, for something so small. It's got all the things you could ever really need, to be honest, to produce almost anything you want. I mean, the space, yeah, it is quite small, and it's hard to fit bodies in there, to be honest. But which is obviously something that will stop me from, doing certain things or maybe just thinking about things differently. Like it's a challenge that I'm very willing to accept and take lightly. So in a light sort of manner. But yeah, it's well fit for a small kitchen. I'm pretty excited about it.
At the top of the show, we sort of talked about how, this is a role that's quite rare, where you've got complete autonomy over the menu. What are you excited about, the next sort of year and this role that you have?
I'm pretty excited to just be able to play on some of the more gimmicky things that maybe people that have a particular vision wouldn't be so psyched about doing. Obviously, that don't fit into that vision kind of thing. So I'd like it to my menu to jump around a bit and, play on some classics and some fun things and put big twists on them and that sort of thing. So I think like maybe one menu could have, a lot more maybe Euro sort of dishes and the next could have a lot more maybe Asian ingredients involved, because these are things that I sort of, I like to jump around obviously with my food, and I just like to sort of see what's good at the moment and what produce I can get at the moment and what's fresh and nice. And I don't want to I don't want to have an idea set in my head where I can't sort of use the produce at hand, because there's such a big thing around produce at the moment. It's very hard to get particular things, and there's been a lot of hectic weather sort of forecasts and crises that are affecting your average seasons of produce, So I want to try work around that as much as possible.
You mentioned that you have quite a strict attention to detail, and you find yourself in a position where you can really share your voice on the plate. What do you love about what you do?
I love creating things with my hands. I've always been a very hands-on person in general. I find it a bit, it's a nice release, and especially when someone appreciates something that you create with a vision in your mind, and someone else shares that vision and, really loves it, then it's a huge, huge accomplishment to me, I think. So, just basically making people happy with food is like something that I really, really enjoy. And that's sort of like the big thing for chefing, in my opinion.
Well, Toby, congrats on the new gig, and look forward to seeing what you do there at the old Fitz. Would love having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.